We've been given the go-ahead, and we look forward to getting into this conversation today. My name is Margie Brand. I'm from EcoVentures International, and I'm calling in from Washington, D.C. An early morning for me. Some of us are ending our days. Thank you for being on this conversation with us. We are going to continue having the discussion in the chat bar. Thank you very much. We are here today to talk about leveraging local market systems development networks. And with us today, we have several people contributing to this discussion. There is myself, Margie Brand again. I'm in Washington, D.C. Rajiv Pradhan is joining us from Cambodia. He's with SwissContact. Rifat Zareen Nadia is joining us from Bangladesh, and she works with the Market Development Forum in Bangladesh. Juerg Merz is joining us from Nepal. He's with Helvetas, and he's also on the board of the Market Development Forum in Nepal. And Juerg Okeyo is joining us from Kenya. He's with an organization called Self-Help Africa, and is very connected to the Kenya network, and will be representing the Kenya network. The agenda today, we will be looking at an overview of a study that was conducted by the BEAM network. The BEAM network, as many of you know, is a knowledge platform for market systems development, and an important area of work for BEAM is to support the capacity of local learning networks in order to support members in the implementation of market systems development approaches. And if you are indeed interested in learning more about this work or in working with BEAM Exchange, please contact Ashley Irons. He will be putting his email address in the chat area so that you can connect with him directly. What we will be doing today is talking about the study that was conducted through the BEAM network. We'll also be talking about some of the focus areas of networks, and the looking at each of the three areas, the three networks in Nepal, Bangladesh, and Kenya that were the focus of the study. We'll be looking at some of the functional areas and how these mature as networks evolve, and we'll also look at and discuss a little bit about opportunities to leverage networks globally, and we'll be using SwissContact as a case example on what SwissContact is doing in this area, and then having a discussion on areas for cross-learning and collaboration among networks. So again, thank you for joining us today. I wanted to highlight that under the BEAM Exchange, we conducted a study in 2016 where we started looking at what is happening in terms of the evolution of local learning networks in different parts of the world. And we realized that there were some networks that were at a more nascent stage, even at a conceptual stage, and other networks that had been running for several years. The study selected 3 of those networks to focus on, one that linked to the area of market systems development. One of those was the network in Nepal, in Bangladesh, and in Kenya. There is a link at the bottom of the screen that gives the link to that study on the BEAM Exchange website. It is a long study. I encourage you not to go there now and read it through, but it is something that I think may be useful for you to go to afterwards. Again, the copy of this presentation will be available on the BEAM website as well. One of the reasons that the BEAM Exchange was interested in a study on networks is because it seemed from our research that there was very little that had been done to really understand not only the evolution of networks but how it supports market systems development practice at the local level. And we wanted to really understand what exists, how have these evolved, and ask quite critical questions to ourselves. Are networks useful in informing practice at local level? And how are they useful to development organizations? Who is currently participating in these, and what can we learn from them? And ultimately, our objective was to look at, is this an area which is worth putting effort into, both by local projects, also by donors, and if there were investments being made in the future or ways to grow current networks or start new networks, how can a study like this inform some of those decisions and strategies? Again, the networks that were part of the study, the official names, the Market Development Forum in Bangladesh, goes by MDF, the Market Development Forum in Nepal, with the acronym MDFN, and the Kenya BDS Donor Coordination Group, called the BDCG. I wanted to take a minute to dig a little bit deeper into each of these networks. And we do have three guests with us today representing each of those networks, and thank you also to members of the networks who have called in and are on this this webinar. So thank you very much, and some of the people even that have called in to listen in today were part of feeding into the study itself. So how has each network evolved? What I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Rifat, Zareen, Nadia. She's the program coordinator with MDF Bangladesh. So in other words, she's working full-time. She's a full-time staff person on the program to talk a little bit about the Market Development Forum in Bangladesh. Rifat, I'm going to ask you to unmute your microphone and go ahead. If you need to
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Rifat from MDF Bangladesh. I'm working as a program coordinator for MDF Bangladesh. And as you can see through the slides, there are some subsectors that appears in the slide, and it includes the formation of MDF, which was the MDF was formed in 2005 with a joint effort of CARE Bangladesh, GTZ Progress, SwissContact Catalyst, and IFC ACDF in 2005, and it is formally registered as the Company Act 29. The operating structure is it has 7 executive committee members, and the members are mainly the INGOs here for 2 years. This is the members are Christian Aid, VSO Bangladesh, Concern Universal, Save the Children, Muslim Aid, Practical Action, and Helvetas Swiss Intercorporation. And currently the chair is Christian Aid. Then there are around 25 member organizations in MDF, mainly development organization and private sector, who are working with different market development approaches. And the key activities are annual study tour, which we call Market Jatra, many technical publications, and our main big event is the conference, call it MDF Day. And you can see the budget. It's an self-financed organization now, and the program coordinator covered through the member fees. It's a paid membership fee network. So whoever is willing to be a member of MDF, there is a certain amount as a fee to be a member. So if you have any queries, so you can ask us in the chat box. So over to you, Margie.
Excellent, thank you, Rifat. I wanted to ask you a question. When you look at the member profile and you look at the kind of organizations that are part of MDF, could you speak a little bit about whether they've always been the same type of members, what the interest is from, have it always been local development organizations as well as international? How do local organizations play a role, and also how the involvement of the private sector has changed over time, if they've always been official members or not?
It's very interesting because it has been seen that all the members, maximum members, are the international non-government organizations, mainly working with the market development approaches. But we have some local organizations too, some local NGOs, but not the number is not that much. Basically, INGOs are the maximum member number, and they are very much active in any kind of activities of MDF. And over time, we are planning to include the private sector also, as the market is we cannot work in the market without them. So we are planning to have the private sector on board, and we always include the private sector, the NGO and INGO in any kind of our activities, though if they are not our member or they are our member. So we include all of the stakeholders in any kind of activities, for example, any market jatra or any market cafe or our conference. So through this, we are our activities are working here.
Excellent. And Rifat, the government and donors, are they joining in as part of activities even though they're not official members of the network?
The government and donor, they are, we try to engage them as a speaker of any of our events, and we try to get the knowledge from them as requesting them to be our special guest or chief guest for any kind of advisory events. And before it was we had some donor funded programs in our organization, but now it's a self-finance organization, and we have always the advisory from the donor sector and the public sector also.
And it's self-financed through the membership fees?
Yes, through the membership fee, and sometimes for coordination fees for any kind of events of our member organizations we are coordinating.
Excellent. So membership fees and event registration fees. Thank you very much. And the last question I have is under key activities. You mentioned several things, a cafe and a chakra. Can you explain a little bit more about those events in terms of some of the key events you're running through the network?
Yeah, sure. Market Jatra is one of an attractive event of MDF. We did it with several organizations. The main theme is to go to the field and see the activities going on from very close look. For example, we can go to 3 or 4 member organizations project field area, and we invite our member other organizations, and they register for the trip, and we go for the field visit and see the activities in the field by themselves. It is very helpful because we can understand the field work in many areas. For example, in the south or in the north or in the Howrah area. Last year it was happened in the Howrah area in Sylhet region. So many people whose project was not in there, so they get a glimpse of idea about the field work there, and it was very successful event. And there are market cafe, which includes many discussion with key important points for market development approaches which are needed for each and every organization they are working with these approaches. So it is another small event, but I say very effective event for our organization.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us today. This is where this becomes interesting, because part of what we want to look at is not only understanding how some of these key networks operate, but particularly how they have evolved differently, and what are some of the decisions they've made, because that's really going to inform us as an audience today about how might we decide to grow networks or to start new networks in different areas, or some of the value that they hold to members. So Rifat, thank you very much. I want to move on to talk a little bit about or explore the Market Development Forum in Nepal. And Juerg Merz from Helvetas, who's an executive committee member of the Market Development Forum in Nepal, is with us today. And It is interesting to discuss Nepal next because Nepal actually was birthed from the concept of the Bangladesh network. Juerg, over to you.
Thanks, Margie. A very good afternoon from Nepal. This is Juerg, and as mentioned, I will be introducing the Market Development Forum, MDFN in short, to you. Before presenting the details, perhaps three statements that, in my opinion, summarize MDFN quite well. In essence, MDFN is about promotion of pro-poor market and market systems development approaches in Nepal. The membership is restricted to practitioners, and we continue to be embedded in the original and founding host project. But now some details. I think you see on the screen a few of these points mentioned. The MDFN was conceptualized as part of the DFID-funded Samarth project and started in March 2013. The MDFN's vision is to develop a platform for sharing information, identifying opportunities for synergies, producing evidence for developing policies and plans, and acquiring best available knowledge and disseminating them among the members but also non-members. Just in the beginning or early on, the membership was exclusively for Samarth partner organizations, but this was soon opened up in December 2013 to include other market development practitioners. At this moment, participation in the network is open to market development practitioners, and we define it as the ones who are actually engaged in implementation of market development projects, or people who adapt market development approaches to the weak market conditions in Nepal. With this perspective, we have professionals representing organizations, but we also have individuals who are committed to market development. In our network at this moment, donors and government are not included because we are of the opinion that once donors are included, it will become a barrier for sharing, open sharing of information, of failures in particular, but also it may rather become a marketing event amongst the organizations. So at the moment we have 20 members, and the latest members have just been admitted a couple of months ago. The network is not formally registered at this moment, but this has been a continuous discussion amongst the members, especially with a perspective to become sustainable, long-term sustainable. Some of the members are of the opinion that we should register formally. It also has to do with the current budget. We are supported by Samarth since the beginning, and we're currently trying to assure new funding for the future. The Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation funded Nepal Market Development Program has shown interest to continue supporting the MDFN. The MDFN is guided or steered by an executive committee of 9 members, which was elected in 2014. CIPRED, a national NGO here in Nepal, is currently chairing the MDFN, and we are expecting that we will have new elections sometime in 2017. The network is supported by a couple of part-time staff who are supported or financially supported by the Samarth program. I think the way we work, the forum is convened following an approved annual business plan, and we attempt to meet at least bi-monthly to discuss predefined topics. Generally, the meeting starts with a couple of presentations from member organizations, followed by discussions. But in between, the executive committee meets to discuss organizational issues and plans to be made for the program ahead. The way I see the core functions of the network here, I think at the moment it's mainly about networking amongst the members and knowledge sharing. We have organized internal meetings. Where we discussed sustainability, we discussed exit strategies and results measurement. But we also have our own webpage, mdfn.org, and we have organized a couple of larger events for knowledge sharing. During these events, we also started to engage more in advocacy and lobbying for more market systems-based approaches. And while we see capacity development or collaboration and coordination as important functions of the network, we have not yet been able to notably progress on this. With this, I hope I have given you some ideas about MDFN and some of its highlights. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Juerg. And I'm wondering if you can say a little bit about some of the work that was done around sort of post-disaster management and, I think after some of what happened in Nepal, what were ways that the network played a role in bringing networks together and coordinating?
Quite quickly after the earthquake, we realized that the network actually has something to offer in the context of the humanitarian assistance and bringing in some new approaches. And several partners obviously engaged in the field and applying market systems approaches in practice. And in November, if I'm not mistaken, we organized a meeting with the theme using market facilitation for recovery, and more than 100 participants discussed their different lessons learned, how to engage after a disaster like this, and also some lessons learned how we could do it better in another time. So I think that was one of the main activities that was organized. But we recently had also another event where we looked again at a couple of 1.5 years after the earthquake, how we have progressed, whether other lessons have been learned, and tried to discuss these lessons with donors and other partners. So I think it's more about sharing our experiences, lessons learned from this earthquake experience.
Excellent. Thank you, Juerg. That was a really important function, it seems, of MDFN. So thank you for sharing that more. I'm going to move on to talk about Kenya, and we'll come back. There will be opportunity. You can both in the chat box ask questions or make comments if you would like, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions to the contributors as well. I'm going to move on to the Kenya network, and we have Juerg Okeyo from Kenya. He was previously the program coordinator of the Kenya BDS donor coordination group and is currently a very active member supporting the leadership of that network. So Juerg, if I can hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Margie. I'll give a brief of how the Kenya BDS donor coordination group started off. It started in 2005, and it was initiated by a USAID program, Kenya BDS project, which was actually looking at the concept of the BDS service provision. Now, when it came in, what happened is that there was an urge or a zeal for people to share knowledge in terms of what is working, what is not working, and the concept of BDS was also just coming in Kenya. And so the only place that people could share knowledge is probably looking at the like-minded organizations that have interest in BDS and would want to come together to share the knowledge. So that's how the platform was formed. It's a platform of mostly international NGOs working in Kenya, using either BDS approach, value chain development approach, or M4P approach. So it has developed since then, but what has happened is that it started off as a knowledge sharing, but also there was a component that was brought about, which is about the training aspect. This was due to the fact that if you wanted to go for an M4P training, you had to probably go to Glasgow. And the first two guys went to Glasgow. went in 2005, take an M4P training. When they came back, it was so expensive, and they could not do it to all the probably the program staffs that are in the respective member organizations. So they thought it wise that the best way to do it is simply just bring on board people together and bring the aspect of
George, we're losing your sound a bit. If you can sit a bit closer to the microphone. Thank you.
Okay, and then what happened was that they thought the Glasgow training was very expensive. So what they wanted is to localize the training, the M4P, to be done within Kenya. And so that was what brought about the aspect of training within the group. Now the group has currently about 14 members, 10 are active, and most of them are international organizations. And they have a secretariat, which is actually housed in one of the local member organizations. And this secretariat has full-time employees and several people who are engaged as part-time staff. Within the secretariat, within the group itself, there is the chairperson and the deputy who goes around organizing for the meetings to be held, and the agenda of all the meetings in consultation with the other members of the group. Now, within the group itself, there is also a working group that is always called a training and learning working group. And this is a technical committee that has been selected amongst the member organizations to be able to look at each and every year what we need to focus on and what are the trainings and the sub-themes of the conference supposed to be for that particular year. Now, we have no membership fee. It is a loose, let me say, a kind of a loose form of network, no formal registration at all. And what happens is that we came up with a strategic plan in 2013 that wanted that we expand and bring on board various people that could also champion for our subscribe to the knowledge and sharing aspect. And these are the private sectors, the government, and donors. But that has not yet worked out well to date. Our flagship event, the key one, is we hold an annual conference. For the last 12 years, it has been done, and it attracts quite a number of participants from different organizations. So far, about 75 organizations have actually who implement programs within Kenya, and even around East Africa have actually been participating in our flagship event, which is the annual BDS conference. It attracts quite a number, between 100 and 150 participants every year. And the first 2 days of the conference, it normally runs for a whole week. The first 2 days is always a training that can focus on issues to do with M4P and issues to do with value chain development. Now, the budget is actually sustainable in terms of the participants who come and register for the conference pay the fees, and the fees fully cover for the secretariat and general operating cost of the conference. So I can say that it is actually sustainable. Occasionally, any of the members can come out and get or identify an international facilitator who can always come in to facilitate the conference and also facilitate the training aspect of the group. So basically, that's it. That's what we are about. Thanks.
Thank you, George. George, could you share a little bit with us even though the network is now very impressively sustainable from the registration fees, could you talk a little bit about some of the donors that have been available or rather involved over time, and in what type of area they supported or role they played?
Okay, if you look at most of the programming in Kenya, you will find that the knowledge learning aspect is always a key component in each and every project or program that is in Kenya. Whether it is funded by EU, whether it is funded by DFID, whether it's funded by USAID, it is always there. So you'll find that this is what is actually bringing people together, because they would want to see and learn from others. So if the concept of market systems development is actually being championed by all the organizations, they would want to look at what are some of the challenges that they would face, and how do they go about addressing the challenges. At the same time, look at what are some of the successes and how have they managed the successes. Now, the donors, this conference or this group has been heavily gotten support from the USAID, from Nadia, from the DFID, and even from the European Union in Kenya. Yep.
Thank you. And Juerg, a little bit about the pre-conference training that takes place. Who runs that? How many people participate? And what is the sort of the purpose of the pre-conference training?
Okay, the purpose of the pre-conference training is that, let me give an example like the M4P. The M4P training, there's a need, and there's a really high demand for that kind of training. But also in the programming aspect of East Africa or Kenya, you find that we have graduates, fresh graduates that are continuously being churned out from the universities to come into the market. And therefore, they are not having specific knowledge on the aspects of value chain development or M4P. So this first 2 days training has always been designed to help them appreciate the fact that the approach of M4P or value chain development, and then is followed by a training, by the conference that actually bring on board presenters that present cases that have worked or have not worked on these two aspects of the training, so that they facilitate the learning of new participants. Of course, the first 2 days will always have quite a number, almost 70% representation from new people who are coming in to learn the concept, while 30% might be those who have always been coming there as repeat participants, which therefore makes the engagement or the process of learning very much complete and very much easy, because they can be able to learn from the experiences as they move on. This attracts close to over almost 100 participants every year.
Thank you, Juerg. And I know that conference is a really significant event in Kenya, and has drawn people from the actual broader region, from Tanzania, from Rwanda, from Uganda, etc., at different times. And the pre-conference training is also very significant for members in the region. So thank you for sharing more about that. Thank you very much, Juerg. Thanks for joining us today. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the areas in the study that we identified as areas that the networks were more or less involved in, and it almost appears as though networks are performing increasingly complex set of functions as they mature or as they decide to take on different functional areas. And if we start with the yellow area, networking, one of the key areas seems to be an area of networking others who are involved in the same space. There's also a function of knowledge sharing and then active knowledge generation. And also the area of linking members to capacity building and training opportunities, not necessarily running those themselves. Some of the networks do that, but also linking them to other opportunities. So both of those functions seem to exist. There are three other areas that the networks are more or less involved in. One is advocacy and lobbying activities. This could be from the government side. It could also be from the area of lobbying about effective practices or advocating for effective practices within development organizations. So within all of those areas, and also advocating with donors as to how to support effective practice in this area. The last two functions listed here, collaboration between stakeholders and a coordination function, are probably the ones that networks have been less involved in. And I wanted to explore those specifically because I think the first 5 areas from networking onwards that I spoke about are ones that we're probably all more familiar with. But the very interesting pieces come between collaboration and coordination. And I just wanted to offer a slightly different perspective on thinking about those two functions. If we look at collaboration, one of the areas this can involve is testing and tightening of market systems development concepts as they apply in local areas. So a lot of what we're seeing at the moment is that market systems development concepts and a lot of the learning is coming from outside of regions through international donors or training institutes, but there's a lot of opportunity for some of this testing and tightening of concepts to happen at the local level. Or areas such as collaboration between practitioner organizations on generating knowledge on what are cultural norms, what are perceptions, and what are social issues that drive market behavior at the local level. So a lot of localized collaboration that has the potential to be developed under networks, which is happening over at a more or lesser extent currently with the networks in the study. But a lot of potential in that area. Under the coordination area, something that I think is interesting is looking at what is the potential for coordination between organizations' activities within market systems. So how can networks play a role in coordinating some of those? And some of the networks studied and people interviewed were saying that they really saw a need for greater coordination on the different activities, and that the network could play a role making sure that people weren't all working with the same private sector actors, or were working with them in a similar way and giving a similar message to those private sector actors. Or also we're working with different parts of the market system in different areas, because often people found that the same development organizations are working again and again with the same organizations and trying the same things in the same areas. And how does the network play a little bit of a bird's eye view perspective on what is happening and inform members, or keep track of those, so that members use this as a bit of a platform to decide where is an area they can work in and how do they know where others are working. And potentially this could even happen across subsystems such as health and education systems, etc. So just an interesting way to think about the function of networks in a different level. What I'd like us to do now is to look at these 7 sort of functional areas. If we're going to summarize network functions. Again, this was something that we developed for the study. This is not necessarily something based on a piece of theory elsewhere. But let's look at these functional areas. They plotted here on a spider diagram, and the way a spider diagram works is that if, for example, there is if we look under networking, and if there is something under networking that is, if a network is operating more closely and doing more activities under networking, you can see my X on the screen there. That means that I'm closer to that the outer circle. That means the network is very involved in networking. If I was putting an X close to the inside of the circle, it means the network is not functioned much or focused on the area of networking. The same if I'm going to look at advocacy and lobbying. If I had to put an X closer to the outer ring, it means it's not extremely focused, but it's doing a bit of advocacy and lobbying work. But if I put it on towards the inside, it means it's less focused on that area. So I'm going to actually ask the 3 contributors right now from Bangladesh, Nepal, and Kenya to plot for us on the spider diagram where you see your networks most focusing and least focusing. So for each of those areas, you can go ahead right now and start plotting. And you'll see there's a little key as they do that on the bottom right of the screen. Bangladesh is all up, is being shown in orange. Then Nepal is in green, and Kenya is in the light purple area. And so what you will see is that people are showing where their networks are more or less focused. And I'm going to average those out for us as people have indicated on the screen. So let's have a look. So networking seems to mostly be, most of the networks are very involved in a networking function. So networking members. Sorry, that was just cleared by someone. I'm not sure, Sarah, how that, perfect. Thank you very much. So again, most of the networks are involved in that networking function. If we move to knowledge sharing, we can see that's probably sort of an even area. The knowledge sharing is something that is also a focus of many of the networks. We look at knowledge production, and that's something that's maybe a little bit less if we had to average it out. So actually producing new knowledge. Some of the networks are much more involved in this than others, but producing new knowledge through the network is something that's still a high area, but maybe not as much. If we look at capacity building and training, I'm going to just average it into the middle, but as we can see, this is where there's quite a difference between the networks. The network in Nepal focuses a lot less on the capacity building and training function, whereas Kenya, that's a big focus through that annual conference and that annual event and the pre-conference training. So bigger difference here in terms of the networks. Advocacy and lobbying, again, more similar. In terms of the three networks studied, although advocacy and lobbying is also not as big a focus area as maybe the network and knowledge sharing, was. Collaboration, again, something that the networks do focus on sort of in a more even way, except that probably less so than some of these other functions. And coordination too, again, if I had to average it out, slightly less than the others, but something that is similar between networks. So we are, and it was an interesting result of the study that even though the networks were formed in different ways, their organizing structure is different, and they are doing different types of activities, quite different activities between the networks. When we sort of synthesized it into these different functional areas, we did see that there was commonality in where some of the focus areas were. And some of the people being interviewed were saying that they did see potential for some of the networks to expand in some of the areas that are less of a focus area. I do want to point out that it is not, the purpose is not to say that networks all have to evolve all of these areas, that it is fine to say that some networks have made a decision that this is just not an area they want to focus on. And I think that was helpful to see, it's particularly for networks such as Nepal, who said very clearly there are areas we have explicitly decided we do want to take on, and other areas where we explicitly do not want to focus on at this stage. So thank you for plotting that, everybody. That was very helpful and very, very interesting to see that plotted on the system here. I wanted to now invite Rajiv Pradhan, who is with SwissContact in Cambodia, to share with us a little bit about how SwissContact is supporting the development of networks, and particularly why SwissContact is interested in this. And we invited Rajiv to join us today. He was very involved in setting up the MDF network in Bangladesh and actually chaired that network for 2 to 3 years. And he was then, he actually introduced the learning from the Bangladesh network to Nepal when they were exploring how to move ahead with the Nepal network initially. And SwissContact has, as Juerg was saying, shown interest in supporting the MDF network in Nepal after the current host project comes to an end, and taking on this through potentially the SwissContact new market development project that will start in that area. The SwissContact is also explored starting a Mekong market development network in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. That's something under discussion, and is also involved in considering an Asia-Pacific M4P peer learning network. So many different areas involved. Rajiv, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Margie. Greetings, everyone. Just clarification, I was not involved with the start of the MDF in Bangladesh, but later when I went in and joined Catalyst, so was there kind of, worked as the chair. And I see Junaid as one of the participants here, was very actively involved as the manager or the executive director. Thanks, Margie. It's a really interesting discussion. Just wanted to answer your question, why interest of SwissContact in the whole area of network development. I think for SwissContact, it's always been, we believed in the principles of private sector development and market systems development, whatever in 1959, whatever it was called then, but always believed that we had worked through the private sector, maybe not, studying the whole systems, complex system as it's now. But there's always been a belief, and that's one of the key mission and vision that drives us into why the whole, why and our work in the network. In the Cambodia, as you said, Mekong, we're still thinking, but definitely because we're based in Cambodia right now, we were talking to like-minded organizations. It'll be a little while, but definitely that's our interest here. What we feel is that a lot of work has been done to push the whole market system agenda for inclusive economic development. However, we've seen particularly there's struggle in the other sectors like service sector, you can talk of health sector or other public service sector. There is still much work to be done, and if you all believe in that this is a good approach to take and this does help the whole inclusive economic development, I think it's necessary for all of us to collaborate, coordinate, and take this agenda forward. Because I think we do struggle, if we go as individual organizations, we do struggle. And there's some experiences coming out of MDF Bangladesh, I think even out of MDF Nepal, that going as a group and lobbying, particularly the donors, because that is our business model as of now, that we take the money from the donors and implement projects. It could be from private sector later, foundations, is already as a business model. So I think we've always believed that there is a need for collaboration and coordination among different organizations to come together, because that really helps, and your earlier slide, in the whole advocacy and lobbying. Because we also see a lot of times networks do, sometimes the agenda of the networks can be varied because it depends on the networks, but I think one of the key network services, if that's on policy and lobbying, then advocacy and lobbying, then this whole collaboration, coordination plays a big role. And that's why we're interested in this whole network development. And, for that, I think we've always seen that, and in Bangladesh, I've seen it personally, the whole professional management of a secretariat is absolutely key to make sure the network works well with a vision and strategy that's set forward by the members. I mean, that is key. A lot of times we let the vision and strategy are not clear, and then then the network secretariat is not working well. So I think one of the reasons that SwissContact is absolutely interested to contribute to the field is exactly on these points. As an example, we are right now in the Grow Asia network, which is beyond the market development or the MSD network. Say, Grow Asia is part of the World Economic Forum, and quite a few of you might know that. I know friends in Myanmar will definitely know that. We in India, we lead the COCO working group, essentially providing leadership even to the private sector, and a lot of large companies are there. And that has really helped out, help the whole overall the sector to move forward. In Cambodia, even though we're not in the sector, for example, Cassava working group, we support, and we kind of have taken in that small working group of the Cambodian Partnership for Sustainable Agriculture, which is under the Grow Asia network. We've kind of taken the network activities and then helped to coordinate the activities, at least initially, with organizations like CAPAC and UNDP in there. In Latin America, we're doing the same, in fact, with BEAM, tied up with BEAM and ASOCHAM to start the whole network there. So I think it's for us and provide these services, the thinking of professional management services for the collaboration, coordination for advocacy. In there, I think one of the missing pieces also, the experiences I've had even from Nepal, even before all this MDF, personally, I've had even from a private company I was working, how important the networks were. What we see still missing in the networks is the whole local voices. I think we talk of local networks, but still, I mean, a lot of our participants will resonate with that it's still kind of, I feel, capital-based. I mean, capitals of any countries we're working in. Where, for example, if you talk Bangladesh, why aren't the people in Rangpur which is in the northwest of Bangladesh, discussing about these issues, because they're the people right close to the ground, and they're the ones that can actually bring in the real problems. If you talk of Nepal, I mean, you can go to, why only Kathmandu? Why don't you go to Dankota or any of the areas? So I feel, I mean, there is still more work to be done, and that's also an area that we're interested in to look into. And I think this then would really truly reflect the learning and help the field to develop, rather than just some of the, all of us, I think we sit, I mean, most of us in the room probably, I'm not, judging, but at least myself, sometimes sitting in the capital and discussing strategies where at the field level, the strategies need to come from there. So I guess that part, if you can take the local networks even further down, that will really help. And SwissContact, in a way, is committed to see if we can do that. So in conclusion, answering the question why we're interested in this is, I think we believe in the subject. It's part of our mission. We feel it's our duty to contribute to the local and the global learning. We aspire that more projects on these kind of the market system development, private sector development are being designed. So I think because if this is a way of alleviating poverty, looking at inclusive economic growth, then there should be more, funds to implement projects, and ultimately the private sector then takes over. And for that, I think we need to all join force with a common vision, and that would be supported with the proper management of networks. I think these three, to do this, I think SwissContact has the interest and we're there for that support. I hope that answers your question, Margie.
Excellent, Rajiv. It's really useful, and thank you. It's wonderful to have someone with your experience in this area and who's been so involved in the networks. Rajiv, I'm wondering if you could say, I know that some donors are particularly interested in listening into this webinar if they're not on with us now and accessing the recording afterwards. If you had to give advice on the way that a network could be formed or set up, from your perspective, what would be a starting point from a donor? Would this be to link something to an existing project, to find a group of coordinated people and motivated people? What would be some of your advice?
Even though I don't want to say the donors should push for a network, but if you look at the network in Bangladesh, if you look at the network now in Kenya or Nepal, they've kind of been a donor-led, or at least that's in Bangladesh. I know that it's been one of the objectives for Catalyst, and probably one or two other projects. In Nepal, I think that was also part of the NMDP project, ASI and SwissContact handling that. So though I don't want to say it should be a donor-led, it should be, organized should come together and, just form a network. I think it does help if the donors not exactly push it, but at least to propose to the organizer that they should think of a network now, or have a, if there's a champion who really believes, which champion organizations that believe in the cause, kind of support that organization, not financially, but I would think, just morally, I guess. And I guess because the success of the network will only come in when there's a buy-in from all the members. I don't think I have to repeat that. So because in MDF Bangladesh, we were asked at some point, this is a mandate of Catalyst, SCDF, GIZ, and KL. Why should we be a part of their network? So this is your target that you need to fulfill to your donors. Why should we even contribute? So it becomes, it's a difficult situation to say, yes, donors could also morally support it, but not really promote it. So I'm not sure if I'm answering directly your question, but I think the key to network, success of a network for donors, for anyone, is the champion. There must be someone, within the country or the organization that is championing and said, that we can bring in, and if a donor morally supports it, that's great.
Excellent. Thank you, Rajiv. That's very interesting. And as Fahad has pointed out in the chat, the question is, should these be donor-driven anyway? And I think you've really touched on that for us, that this is not necessarily a donor-driven area, but something where we need champions locally. And if we don't have those champions, and this is something that's simply mandated, the network is not necessarily something that is going to take off initially or have that energy. We can't assume that. So thank you for pointing that out to us. The presence of donors, as Junaid says, particularly helps, although maybe practitioners may not have an open voice if donors are in the room. I think that's we heard that from Juerg around the Nepal Network's decision not to include donors as openly as members. But we did hear that having a host or sponsored program is a helpful thing, which does have a mandate to spend time on the network. But we are hearing that it's not necessarily something that needs to be donor driven, but that we need to find the local champions. So Rajiv, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. I did want to recognize that there were several recommendations that came out of the report. I wanted to cover those briefly in terms of recommendations that support networks in different ways, and then talk a little bit about some of the questions that have been asked on the chat. So if there are any more questions or comments or people who would like to share something, please let me know and we can make you a presenter and you can actually share a bit about your network. So let me know on the chat. But I'm going to just talk very quickly about some of the recommendations. So the recommendations from the study came in 3 different areas. One was how to support existing networks, how to establish new networks, and how to support the broader system in which networks operate, almost the market systems context for networks. So just very briefly, supporting existing networks, some of the discussion is encouraging the involvement or the evolvement of those network functions that we saw in the spider diagram. So encouraging networks to consider whether that is something that those are new functional areas they want to explore or dig deeper into. Also incorporating local network participation into the results frameworks of local projects, so that there is more space and time for local members to actually make the case to be involved in the network through their actual project activities and project budgets. Also assisting in the development of metrics that could be used by networks to assess and track their impact and value. And one of the questions that came up on the chat from Alistair was whether we could actually explore and ask each of the speakers to talk about if and how they are measuring the effectiveness of their network. So that is the question I'm going to close with. Juerg, Rifat, and Juerg talk a little bit about how do you measure the effectiveness of the networks, whether that's happening formally, informally, or not at all. So we would like to hear from you on that. But that is definitely something that was a recommendation of the report, was to focus on developing some of those metrics that can be used by networks. Also, another recommendation was to reduce the culture of self-promotion and marketing and encourage honest and open dialogue. One of the things we found was that some network members said, well, we can't really ever get to true discussion because members are self-promoting to donors that are there, to the private sector. They're self-promoting to other NGOs and international development organizations, and we can't really talk about what has gone wrong, what are we learning, what are we struggling with. So encouraging that type of reduction of the culture of self-promotion marketing was kind of essential to get that conversation deepened. Recommendations around establishing new networks, definitely advocating for setting up new networks in areas that don't have networks. There are several people on this conversation that are involved in setting up nascent networks. Please do let me know if you'd like to say a little bit about them. And also allowing independent local network models to emerge. I mean, what we did find, interestingly, was all 3 of the networks that were the focus of this study definitely emerged in different ways and had their own timeline of developing in different areas and different decisions that were made, and we definitely didn't see one model as standing out above the others, and so we felt very much that independent local network models were critical. And in essence, in terms of understanding the broader system in which the networks operate, was, the key recommendation was trying to align technical approaches at a global level in terms of market systems development, because I think there was so much debate between donors and in different areas about the technical area, which was challenging to the networks. Facilitating cross-learning between local networks. I see this webinar as being a starting point to that. Connecting local networks with capacity building opportunities regionally and globally. Encourage technical contributions from networks and network members into global technical deliberations. It seems like a key channel or vehicle to get local participants involved, and setting up local donor networks as an aside to the technical implementation networks was a strong recommendation, particularly from the DCED, who was one of the informants into the study. So with that, I'm going to hand back to the presenters very quickly. If you could just say something about the way that you're measuring success. Juerg, could I start with you?
Okay. I think in the MDFN so far, we haven't been involved in any formal measurement of success. I would rather say it's rather informal by looking at the interest amongst the members to participate in the different events, but also the number of membership applications that we have had. But we haven't at this stage done any measurement of the success of the network.
Excellent. Thank you, Juerg. Rifat.
Same thing goes for MDF Bangladesh also. The membership is growing day by day, and the measure of our success is not very formal now, but we can say that before 2005 there were not that much projects in Bangladesh following market development approaches, but now we can see that several organizations are following these approaches, and they're working on it, and we just maybe there is a direct or indirect effect of MDF network, because we keep all our members together, and they are being able to know more about market development approaches, and which is a success for our network, I think so.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Also, so less formal at this stage. George.
I think we have a mechanism where we meet quarterly, and always it is after the first quarter after the conference. That is around every February, March. We sit down to review what went well and what did not work out for us in the previous conference, and then see how best then we can be able to improve on the same. So that I would say is the only way that we use to measure success of our event. But also I would want to say that the participation, given that the conference attracts quite a number, almost over 100 every other year, is also a way of judging whether it's still the content is still of interest to people or not. It's a way of making success. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, George. That's very helpful. I wanted to ask, invite Christopher Thompson, who's been involved with one of the Asia Pacific M4P peer learning network to share briefly. Christopher, is your microphone on? Christopher, as soon as you get that microphone to work, you can let me know that you're ready. I did want to mention that one of the questions that has come up in the chat is whether how sustainable the networks are, and I did want to mention that the Kenya network is pretty much self-sustaining at this stage through the registration fees that are coming in for the annual conference and the pre-conference training. And which has been a very interesting evolution for that network, because they were able to make very independent decisions about how to move forward and where to focus their activities, and that includes being able to fully cover the costs of a local development organization which acts as the secretariat, with some full-time people involved in supporting the network. The membership fees and event registration fees for Bangladesh cover a lot of the costs of the operation of that network, and the Nepal network is largely funded through support through a host project and members providing time and in-kind support. There was also a question about how to be involved in some of the events, and I know that even we'll connect some people after this meeting. James Elekwachi has asked George Okeyo from Kenya how to be involved. James is involved in Nigeria at the moment, so I think there's going to be a lot of activity after this webinar in terms of connecting people in different parts of the world. Christopher, can I ask you to share briefly? You can unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I hope everyone can hear me.
Perfect.
Okay, sorry, I was having technical difficulties. So the M4P Peer Learning Network in Asia was an idea that came from a former informal network that GIZ had, which was really focused around discussing day-to-day management and operational issues when running a market systems development program. So we wanted to reactivate this, and how we're a little bit different from the other programs discussed is that our members are not, well, participants are not organizations, but they're programs. So we had 6 participating programs, and that includes us, Prisma. It included Samart in Nepal, Catalyst in Bangladesh, and MDF, among others. And it was set up in, this year it was set up in 3 different forums, which were separate from each other. The first forum was called the Team Member Forum, which was non-senior level staff, national staff, that could get together and discuss issues related to day-to-day operation, technical discussions in M4P, and really the topics were really led by the participants through a pre-event questionnaire. So we tried to keep it more participant-led rather than top-down driven. The second forum was a team leader forum, which was more focused on management issues. And the third forum was a director forum. So these forums were separated because we, similar to what you were saying before about having participants be able to speak up, meaning not having donors in the room. We also had the same thing. So for the team forum, we didn't want to mix team leaders with national staff members because we wanted people to be honest in their discussions. And the way the network is set up is very informal. This year, Prisma ran the event by paying for the venue and the materials and the facilitators, but the programs all paid to send their staff and accommodate their staff. And now this year it will be handed over to one of the participating members that volunteered to take it on.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing, Christopher. And again, that's the Asia Pacific M4P Peer Learning Network that's been set up, and Christopher has agreed to fill in one of the summary charts that the presenters presented at the beginning of the webinar so that can be included in this presentation when it gets posted on the Beam website. I did want to say thank you to everyone for being here today. This does take us to the end of our webinar. Very interesting to look at the evolution of local learning networks in the market systems development space. Thank you very much to all the speakers that were involved today. Again, the presentation recording and the research will be available on the Beam website.